Good afternoon, and thank you very much for the opportunity to be here. Thank you to my co-chairs for their ever-present opportunity to make energy and technology exactly what it is, a nonpartisan, bipartisan issue that affects everybody here in the state of Connecticut. I was elected to the state Senate in 2015. Before that, I had the great honor and privilege to serve as the first selectman of the town of East Lyme during those two hurricanes in 2010 or 11, Sandy and Irene. So like Senator Needleman, I'm aware of the coordination that must occur on the ground in order to get power back up and running, get roads and streets cleared. And we see the same situation occurred in 2017 and in actually just a couple of weeks ago with the tropical storm. First, let me say that the linemen and the men and women on the ground that did the work to restore our power were superb. They worked as hard as anybody can work. They worked long hours. They worked through the night, and they did the best job that they can. We're here today talking about legislation because this is a management issue. This is a failure of management, and in each case, if you look back at the two major hurricanes, if you look back at the news after 2017, you're going to see that the promises have been the same. The fixes have been promised to be the same. After 2017, they talked about better coordination with municipalities. Well, that didn't happen. They talked about a better communication system with the public. Clearly, that was a situation that had difficulty over this past tropical storm. I can tell you of one particular instance. On the Saturday after the storm, there were 40-plus bucket trucks with crews sitting at Waterford High School all day with no direction on where to go, and people were still out of power. We have to do better than that. Our town public works worked very hard, and we're on standby, and we're often underutilized. So today, we talk about opening a comprehensive conversation. We're standing here with a very broad brush. We have everything that we can think of that needs to be addressed on the table. And that's the best way to do it. Let's have open and honest conversation. Let's see what we can do. If there is a short session, that we can bring some relief almost immediately. But the real work is going to be done in January at the long session, where we can take a deeper dive and remake the world of energy and power and transmission here in the state of Connecticut. We need to talk about things like, how does ISO operate? How does utility now get reinvented in the new way that energy is generated? What about grid modernization and battery storage and backup and energy efficient programs? How do they all play into the business model that is the monopoly of the utilities? And then finally, I think a good look at deregulation. But those are issues for January session, when there's time and there's a lot of conversations and there's a lot of hearings. So I'm thankful for the opportunity to be part of this start, and grateful for the good people behind us as we work together as a team to introduce this legislation. And I thank you very much.
So thank you all. And as we tried to do during the regular session, all of our bills were bipartisan. Almost every bill that we passed unanimously through the legislature. David and I are very consistent about wanting to do that this time, which is why we asked our ranking members to be here as part of this. So now we're prepared to take some questions. Does anybody have any?
Sure. What are the things that, are there things that Pure needs, powers that it does not presently have, that you think the legislature should take up in September or some other time for a special session?
So I think part of what we want to do in any special session is ratepayer relief, refunds, things like that, and enhancing Pure's ability to actually do their job better. I think there have been some issues about who has seats at the table, how we go about making rates, demystifying some stuff, and giving the public and Pure more of an opportunity to be part of the conversation, strengthen their regulatory ability. One of the things that was brought up is maybe we should be looking at, whether it's legislation or just reaching out, having our Pura reach out to Massachusetts Pura and the other agencies that regulate rates in the Eversource area, because one of our problems is sort of the cost shifting, how they allocate costs in a region by region basis. It's got to be more communication. And as Senator Formica said, ISO is a big part of this. We need to make sure that ISO is working for all the member states.
That a deal was reached with Eversource a while back with lawmakers in Pura, so that they have a 12% rate of return profit. That seems unusual, and how do you change that? I mean, if that's what was agreed upon, how do you go in there and say, well, we're just not going to allow that anymore?
So I do believe that Pura has some authority to set rates of return. I think the way federal law is, utilities are allowed a rate of return adequate to support their company and the investments they need to make. But I think, again, how do you do that and still ensure that the ratepayers get the best deal for their money? They're allowed a rate of return. And I guess if you were in business, the ideal business to own is one that wherever you have costs, you can just go get the money back, which is why I thought their spokesperson's comments were so insensitive. A rate of return is important for a utility to be healthy, but a guaranteed rate of return that they get whether they succeed or fail is not appropriate. That's a critical factor. You should not make money on your failures. You should not be able to recoup all your costs based on doing things badly. A rate of return to run your company is reasonable, but how we've evolved to where we are just doesn't seem reasonable.
Insensitive that at a time when people are lucky to get a 2 or 3% raise, you have a CEO that got a 33% increase. Does that bother you?
Of course it bothers me, and it bothers me up and down the line. You're running a public utility. I've been telling people that it's not your grandmother's Con Edison or CLMP, where it was a fully regulated business, and that meant looking at everything. We want to strengthen Pura so that compensation is part of the equation of rate increases. That's just not okay as far as I'm concerned, because it incentivizes people at the top to look at return on investment for their shareholders, which then directly compensates them for their performance, and everybody else in the equation is secondary, whether it's frontline workers or ratepayers. It's like it all goes up to the top. And I will tell you that that's probably part of what goes on in corporate America in general. We have financialized all of our businesses. It's not only here. You guys live in the media world, and it's in the media world too. It's all about return on investment for a few people at the expense of what is your charge to do your job for the public. So the public seems to matter less. It's different when there's competition. It's wrong when there's no competition. It's just wrong.
This might be different from previous investigations. Can you explain how this might be different from previous legislative investigations? We went through this in 2011 and 2012. How is 2020 and 2021 be different?
Well, I think part of it is that the cast of characters is different. We have 3 people that own businesses. 2 of us have been first selectmen. I have the hardest working co-chair in the legislature. We are committed to doing everything we can. I believe we have an unbelievable opportunity because of the new commissioner at Pura, who really is not from the state of Connecticut. She wasn't born out of the system that we've all come to accept. She is here and taking a fresh look at everything we do, how we make rates, how the grid works, how we compensate the utilities. All of that is really important. And when you have people that are new, that put fresh eyes on this, I'm hopeful that we're going to get something good. And I'm prepared to say, as Senator Formica said, maybe we have to go back to the whole idea of deregulation. You know, I go back to the 1980s, because I'm certainly at least that old, and ask myself the Reagan question: are you better off today than you were 4 years ago? Are the ratepayers of Connecticut better off today than they were 20 years ago when deregulation happened? And I will tell you, whether it's individuals or businesses, I have not met one person who says, yeah, it's been great, unless you're in the energy business. Then maybe it's been great. But the ratepayers of the state of Connecticut have not fared better, in my opinion, but I want to be unbiased, and I want to make sure that we get to the bottom of whether that has worked. And then I think we need to look at it. It's on the table as far as I'm concerned.
20 years ago, so we're talking about more storms than we did 20 years ago.
Well, I would argue that in Eversource's management of events, they are not taking into account a rapidly changing climate environment where we are seeing more storms, worse storms, bigger storms. I want you to think about Hurricane Sandy, which came up that coast and made a left turn into a part of New Jersey 50 miles south of New York City. If that storm had come straight up the coast and we were on the eastern side of that storm, the world as we knew it would have been very, very different. Coastal Connecticut would have been a disaster. The electric grid would have been a disaster. And I think that Eversource's strategy of a larger service area with Massachusetts and New Hampshire bringing resources down from their larger service area, if the whole area was impacted, they don't have anybody to bring. And I think that that's going to hurt them, and I've been saying that to them for 7 years now, that we are in a different environment and things are going to get worse, not better.
Ratepayers during the storm and the outages that they just did not have faith in Pura. What do you say to those ratepayers?
I'm sorry.
We heard from ratepayers during the storm that they didn't have faith in Pura to truly regulate. What would you say to them?
As Norm, hinted at, I would say to them that we have exactly who we need in that chairmanship currently, and Marissa Gillette, to make people feel like that Pura is going to hold the utilities' feet to the fire. She's been with us for 15 months, and her professional background is exactly what we need in this role at this time. So, I can only reiterate my confidence and the Senator's confidence in the current leadership at Pura that, I think some good things are going to result after these two investigations on the rate making side, and then also their investigation with the storm response.
Whether Pura did its job. There's a lot been made of the pre-storm reports they made. I don't know what exactly Pura is supposed to do after they get that information, but the Connecticut Conference of Municipalities has asked for an independent investigation of Pura to see whether or not, just as long as along the same lines you're talking, is if its oversight powers need to be strengthened. So shouldn't Pura's actions be reviewed?
So, sorry. So I did speak to Joe DeLong about the whole issue of the plan that was submitted ahead of the storm, and I think they got it wrong. I mean, that's certainly with hindsight. I think UI got it less wrong in terms of one predicted a level 4 outage, one predicted a level 3 outage, and if you go to their emergency operations plan, that's a big difference, because that speaks to the amount of resources that you have ready and waiting to come into the state. In my opinion, we lost days because of the prediction. I guess one of the things that bothers me is it's their job to know better, but it's also their job to own the mistake. To get out there and say we did everything right just seems insensitive and wrong. You can make a mistake, but one of the things that particularly upset me was when Governor Lamont went to Berlin and sat there and talked to the CEO and then came out with Craig Hellstrom as opposed to the CEO to speak to what happened. Would have been a simple thing. Maybe we were off by one level. It turned out they were off by 2 levels. It was a level 2 event, and a level 2 event is a major, major, major event where every decision you make costs days of restoration. But the fact that he didn't come out The fact that he sent somebody else out spoke to me of an insensitivity. It would be easy as the CEO for me to go and say, you know what, we made a mistake. We could have done better, and we are going to pull out all the stops to help the ratepayers, the people who are in the dark, the people who are sick, the people who are sweating. We're going to do what's right here, and then be out front, own it. And he did not do that, and that's really upsetting.
That was my question. Outside of a sternly worded public statement and the opening of an investigation, what has Pura done? If anybody else wants to speak to whether they should be looked at, I'd be certainly interested in hearing your opinion.
Well, I think Pura accepts their report. The report comes... Yeah, very hard to hear behind the mask. Several of us are old and deaf.
My question basically is, why shouldn't you, as the Energy and Technology Committee, be taking a look at Pura's actions in regulating these utilities in their preparation and responses to this storm? They're certainly not going to do it. The Connecticut Conference of Municipalities, which I believe represents all 169 towns and cities, has called for an independent investigation. Who looks at Pura?
So we do, and we will be doing that as part of our informational forum. We are going to give all of the key players in this, Pura, DEEP, the utilities. We also want to speak to Dominion and ISO. We want to get to the bottom. You know, at one point, this was going to be a one-issue hearing. It was going to be a hearing on the rate. Now we have two issues, and we really need to get answers to both of those questions. And we need to know what Pura did with the information. Did they challenge them and go back and say, are you sure it's going to be a level 4 outage? Because the planning is significantly different based on your predictions. So you're absolutely right. It's something we need to do.
Aside from the planning and what error they may have made about assessing the storm, there's also the question that you guys referred to of coordination and communication. And we have two former first selectmen here who had a front row view of that. So to what extent is that going to be an important part of the inquiry? And do you have any thoughts as to, given the lessons learned in 2011, 2012, how do we still have an issue of coordinating and communicating with local communities?
One of the things that happened in East Lyme on Route 161 way back in the hurricanes of 2010 and 11 was, you know, we had a lot of devastation, a lot of trees down similar to this event. We called in the National Guard, who are much better equipped with tree removal. We waited for days to get Eversource in there to make sure that the lines were all dead. So it's about coordination. We have the resources here, and let's understand this. We do not want the utilities to fail. Nobody wants utilities to fail. We're all walking around with electricity all over us with cell phones and computers. We need the utilities to be successful. But, you know, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. And that's what's happened storm after storm. So better coordination, better use of the resources that are available. Public Works crews, again, standing on the sideline, waiting for confirmation that the lines are deadened so that they can remove trees. And as I said before, that large group of bucket trucks sitting there all day on a Saturday without being deployed. So there are a lot of things that we have to look at. And to your Pura question, you know, we have to find out, did they approve the rate increase and what criteria did they use, or was it just a determination by the utility that they were going to do this rate increase and Pura was forced to say, okay. So those are conversations we need to have, to your point.
And I want to speak a little bit to the response. 2 out of 3 times that we've had major weather-related events since Eversource put in their automated reporting system, the system crashed and failed. That's a big failure on my part. The limiting of the staffing in state, the number of line crews, the reduction in support and staff on the ground has been, in my opinion, a very, very bad decision on their part. They will argue that they made it in the interest of keeping costs under control, but on the other end of the spectrum, senior managers made $50 million or $45 million last year in aggregate, and and they cut at the base level for various reasons. When you actually look at their staffing now, they're not breaking out how many are trainees and apprentices. How few people do they actually employ that can work independently now is really a question that we want to get to. And in an event like we had, what Senator Formica spoke about, with out-of-state crews sitting and waiting to get direction from the local people in Connecticut to tell them where to go next, was an extraordinary amount of time. And I think that's a staffing issue also. I think that going from a much larger number of emergency operation centers to a much smaller number has made people trip over themselves in the 3 EOCs that they have statewide, the regional EOCs. I just think that they cut themselves to the bone, and if that resulted in lower rates, that would be great. But you sort of make a decision here. We're going to cut, and then we're going to reward at the top and not hire people at the base level to do the job that we need them to do. That's not the way this company should be run. The only bill that I put in last year within the Energy Committee was minimum staffing. I wanted to get to the bottom of what the numbers are, and the numbers are really, really telling. I hear it all the time. I know Senator Formica hears it all the time from current and retired workers who will tell you exactly how that company operates. And I will tell you it's not in the best interest of the state of Connecticut from my point of view, so we need to find out. Anybody got anything else? We're done. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Really appreciate everybody's coming. Beautiful day. It's not raining and it's not 100 degrees.